Let us begin by enlivening our hearts and minds in our gathering with the remembrance of the Holy Prophet and his purified progeny. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Religion is sometimes considered to be, by some, as a purely personal matter, an individualistic endeavor to spiritually uplift oneself. And oftentimes, the term religious or religiously observant, as used by some, refers to this idea that a religious person is someone who upholds their prayer, their daily prayers, someone who makes sure to fast during the month of Ramadan, someone who maintains purity of intention and purity of heart, engages in ritual practice, maybe goes to ziyarah or hajj, and that is all that is sufficient for one to be considered religious. In other words, it's all about what I do to spiritually uplift myself, and my religion or religion does not concern and should not concern anyone else. And that the sense of community within religion is irrelevant. But community, and while of course we know that religion is all of these things, it also entails understanding the significance of community, the importance of society, because community is vital to our well-being, including our religious welfare and success. Because after all, as human beings, even as individuals, we cannot thrive, let alone survive, outside of society. We are social beings by our very nature. It's in our DNA. We can't survive. We cannot do without one another. There was a movie, I think, that came out about 20 years or so, maybe, called Castaway, starring Tom Hanks. You remember that movie? Okay, good, alhamdulillah. Sometimes when I bring up this movie or movies from 20 years ago to some of the youth, they look at me strange and I feel old. So alhamdulillah, it feels like I'm in good company tonight. Castaway, what is the story behind Castaway? So Tom Hanks, I forget what the character's name is in the movie. Essentially, he ends up, and I apologize if there might be some spoiler alerts here for those who haven't seen it. He ends up getting into an airplane accident, crash, and he's the only survivor, and he is washed up onto an island. And he's the only one there. And he has to learn how to live alone, with no one around. And the movie portrays all of the challenges that this character faces in trying to navigate life all alone. And there's an interesting aspect, a prominent aspect of the movie, is when he finally finds the volleyball and he paints a face, or what is supposed to be a face, on the volleyball, and the volleyball's name is what? Wilson. And he speaks to Wilson. And he opens up his heart to Wilson. And he engages in imaginative conversation with Wilson. And Wilson becomes very close to him. There's a very tragic scene when he tries to go out into the sea on the makeshift raft, and he's attached Wilson to a string or a rope. And what ends up happening? Wilson suddenly goes into the sea, and Tom Hanks begins to cry and weep. For him, this is devastating. And the point of this movie is to reinforce this idea. Of course, in the end, alhamdulillah, all is well. It's a happy ending, right? He's saved. Sorry, again, for spoiling the movie for you. But it's a wonderful movie. It shows us this idea, the significance of how we cannot survive and how we cannot thrive except in community, in society. We need one another. And we need one another even when it comes to our individual well-being, including our religious well-being. We cannot do away with one another. And it is through community interaction and community building that we fulfill a vital and important spiritual and religious function as well. And this is why we find that our teachings emphasize on the importance of service to others. Makes up a big part of our religious teachings, dear friends. Yes, the Quran tells us to pray, but it also reminds us to pray in congregation with others. It tells us to fast, but we know the beauty of breaking fast in community, together. It's not the same when you're breaking your fast alone. And there are a lot of people who, unfortunately, for various reasons, they are not privileged to do that. You feel that sense something is missing when you're not in community. And thus, even for our religious well-being, we are always encouraged by our teachings to turn towards service. Not to let any opportunity go by to serve others, to come to the assistance of others, to consciously, to sincerely, and consistently volunteer our time, our skills, our resources in the service and assistance of others. We are always pushed and encouraged to do so. We are encouraged to develop a generosity of spirit and a spirit of generosity. To feel that generosity, service to others, coming to the help of others is something that is vital in our lives. And this is something that we should keep in mind. This is something that we really need to pay close attention to. When we examine the lives of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Ahlul Bayt, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, we find that they were socially mindful. They were mindful of others. We find that one of their primary characteristic, a prominent feature of their lives, was their service to others. We find that they never hesitated when it came to helping others. They never said no. This is why everyone knew the household of the Prophet. This is why when people would be in need, they would come to the door of the Prophet. They would come to the door of the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyida Fatima alayhim as-salam. They would come to their doors because they knew that the Ahlul Bayt never hesitated in helping others, in serving others, in assisting others. The Quran reminds us that one of the core features of leadership, sometimes we think about leadership as something a leader is served by others. Not that the leader serves others, but that others come to the service of the leader. Oftentimes, we find this in politics, we find this in communities, we find this even when it comes to the workplace, that the leader is expected to be served by others. Whereas the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, they teach us that leadership, the quality of leadership, good leadership, is that of service to others. The verse that I began with from the Holy Quran, from chapter 21, Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 73, God says, وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. And we made them leaders, imams, to guide by God's command. Okay? And then God tells us, what else? وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. God says, and we inspired in them the doing of good. This is number one. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. We inspired these leaders to do good towards others. Number two, وَإِقَامَ الصَّلَاةِ. Then, the establishment of prayer, this connection with God, and inshallah we will have a chance in the upcoming nights to talk about what it means, what is spirituality, what it means to connect to God. And وَإِيتَاءَ الزَّكَاةِ, and the giving of alms. Again, the giving of alms in service and assistance of others. Thus, the Quran highlights that a prominent attribute of good leadership is service to others, the doing of good to others. And if we examine the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salam, and his teachings, we find that before anything and everything else, Imam Ali was a social servant. He dedicated his life, his entire life, for others. He dedicated his entire life to promoting the well-being of society, to helping anyone and everyone that he can, in any capacity. This is a primary feature of the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, dear brothers and sisters. And we will see how this is the case from Nahj al-Balagha tonight, from his teachings. Imam Ali was a social servant. He teaches us the significance of service to others and its benefits. Because serving others has tremendous benefits for us, dear friends. If God gives us an opportunity to serve others, then we should not ignore that opportunity. And we'll see in a moment some of these benefits. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he tells us that serving others, coming to their assistance, in saying number 24 of Nahj al-Balagha. He says, من كفارات الذنوب العظام إغاثة الملهوف والتنفيس عن المكروه. I mentioned this briefly in my first night, this statement. He says that a primary means of rectifying wrongdoing, atonement for some of our mistakes, one way to do so is what? Is by providing comfort and rendering relief to those who are grief-stricken. We know that this is especially important in our contemporary period. Many people suffer in different ways. You know, oftentimes we talk about poverty. Of course, poverty is a major source of suffering. The vast majority of the world lives in poverty. The vast majority of the world cannot even imagine the lifestyles that we have, let alone have access to them. So poverty is a major source of suffering. But there are other forms of suffering. In today's world, we find that many people face mental health challenges. Mental health is a big issue. Oftentimes, we try to sweep this problem under the rug, or we try to ignore it, but it's a serious problem, a problem that many people face in the world, and it's become increasingly prevalent. Parents know this, grandparents know this, many young people face depression. They face other mental health challenges. They feel a sense of grief. It's ongoing grief. And what this does is that it even impacts their spirituality, their sense of spirituality. I have many young people, and some who are older but still young, who come to me and they say, Sayyid, the grief that I feel, the depression and the sadness that I feel is impacting my spirituality. I don't feel connected to God. I don't feel connected to the Quran. I don't feel connected to my prayers. I can't. It's a serious problem. So what do we do about this? Imam Ali says one way to atone for wrongdoings is to render relief to those who are grief-stricken. Assist them. Help them. Listen to them. Sometimes all that is required is to listen to someone. They don't want an answer from you. It seems that they want answers, but sometimes the most effective providing of comfort and rendering relief is just to listen to someone. If there's someone who is facing a problem and they come to you, they confide in you, they trust you enough to speak to you, listen to them. Don't dismiss them. We cannot presume because some of these issues are taboo issues. We think and we assume that everyone else faces depression and grief, but we do not. Or that if someone faces various mental health issues, that somehow there is a deficiency in their faith. They're not doing something right. And so culturally, we find it taboo and we try to ignore. And we say, no. Go and read the Quran. Listen to your parents and you'll be better, right? To listen. To try to comfort those. If someone is hurting, to render relief. Listen to them. Provide them with advice. Speak to them. Direct them in directions that can bring relief and assistance to them. This is what Imam Ali alayhi salam says. إغاثة الملهوف والتنفيس عن المكروه. Provide comfort towards others. Not everything, dear friends, is about benefit, what comes to me. Use our time. You may not be able to help by giving advice, maybe. You may not be a mental health professional, maybe. But you can give your time. You can allocate other types of resources. Many people are suffering around the world. In our communities, locally, and in various places. Imam Ali alayhi salam reminds us, don't ignore them. And this, he ties to what? To fulfilling an important religious obligation. If you've done something wrong, if you've made a mistake, you want to correct this mistake. You want to be right with God. You want to purify your heart. You want a clean slate. This is why we ask for forgiveness. Because we want to return to God's mercy. Imam Ali says one good way of doing so is to help others. If you've made a mistake, go and listen to someone. Rectify that mistake. Render relief and comfort to those who face challenges. And in doing so, we fulfill an important religious and spiritual obligation and function. In another statement, saying number 7, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, الصدقة دواء منجح. He says, charity is an effective cure. It's an effective cure to disease and illness. Now, some people might say, what? If you're sick, you go to the doctor. If you're sick, go and the doctor will prescribe medicine. How is charity supposed to help you if you are physically sick, if you are ailing? It helps in this way. When you provide charity, and charity, we think of charity in broad terms, it's not necessarily financial assistance, but any act of goodness towards others, any act of service. When you provide this act of service sincerely for others, they will always appreciate it. And especially if they are grief-stricken, especially if they are facing problems. This appreciation will translate into what? Into a prayer for you, into a prayer for your family. You've probably all experienced this. You help someone, and then their reply is that they pray for you from the bottom of their hearts. They say, oh, may Allah cure any ailments you have. May Allah turn away any problems that you face, relieve you of your distress, prolong your life. May God protect your children. We've heard this all the time. We see this. They pray for you, and it's a sincere prayer. And the sincere prayer goes to God, and God answers those calls. So indirectly, here Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, "As-sadaqatu dawa'un munjih." It's even an effective cure for ailments. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. In the hadith, he says, cure your sick through charity. If you find yourself or others who are facing physical ailments, work towards overcoming these through service to others, through helping others, assisting others. In another statement, saying number 253, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he gives instructions to his devout disciple, Kumail ibn Ziyad. We all know Kumail from Dua Kumail. Imam Ali taught him this dua, this profound dua that inshallah tomorrow night, Thursday night, we will have a chance to recite. Very beautiful words of Dua Kumail that we are all accustomed to. He turns to Kumail and he gives him advice. This is saying number 253 of Nahj al-Balagha. He says to him, Ya Kumail, مر أهلك أن يروحوا في كسب المكارم ويدلجوا في حاجة من هو نائم. Here the Arabic it's a rhythmic, poetic Arabic. And then he says, فوالذي وسع سمعه الأصوات ما من أحد أودع قلبا سرورا إلا وخلق الله له من ذلك السرور لطفا فإذا نزلت به نائبة جرى إليها كالماء في انحداره حتى يطردها عنه كما تطرد غريبة الإبل. What does he say? He says, O Kumail, direct or instruct your family to go out and to do good in the day and in the night. And then he says, I swear, Imam Ali is telling Kumail, he says, I swear by the one whose hearing extends to all voices, meaning I swear by God. If someone pleases another's heart, any hardship, he says, if someone pleases another's heart, God will create a special thing out of this pleasing, so that whenever any hardship befalls him or her, it will come running like flowing of water and drive away that hardship. There is benefit if you please someone's heart. And again, this is broad, can encompass various actions. Someone is sad, you uplift them. You tell them something nice. Right? You gift someone a gift. Everyone loves gifts, right? Pleases our hearts. You help someone in some way. You smile towards someone. Sometimes even outside, you find that if you're going throughout the day and you're feeling down, kind of distressed or anxious or stressed, and someone, it could be a stranger, they smile towards you. What does it do? Automatically causes you to smile as well. And it gives you a little boost. It uplifts you a little bit, right? When someone says something nice to you. Imam Ali says, anytime you please someone's heart, God captures that moment and transforms it into something good, a benefit that will come to your assistance in time of hardship. You face hardship, this act is embodied. And by the way, this is not something strange. The Quran tells us that on the day of judgment, our actions are embodied, that our bodies speak. They will testify for the actions that we do. Our prayers becomes embodied. Our fasting, our charity, our good acts become embodied. And they testify for, or God forbid, against us. So here Imam Ali is saying this act of pleasing someone, it becomes embodied and it comes to your help when you are in need. So there is benefit in pleasing others, in helping others. And here we also learn a beautiful, if we think about this statement, we learn a beautiful lesson. Imam Ali is saying, "Oh Kumail, not only should you do this act, but encourage others to do so as well. Encourage and instruct your family." It's important for us to teach these things, the importance of service and goodness to our families. Let me encourage my spouse. If my spouse does something good, encourage them. Thank them for helping others. Sometimes, unfortunately, what ends up happening is that we get in the way of one another. One wants to perform a good act. They want to help others. The other says, hey, hold on. Why are you going to give money overseas to orphans and others? And we have to put our kids through college. We have bills to pay. We have a mortgage to pay. Right? Instead of getting in the way, we have to encourage one another towards good. Encourage your children. Encourage them to make it part of their habit and their life to help others, to be kind to others, to serve others. This is a beautiful lesson that we learn from Imam Ali. He tells him, "O Kumail, instruct your family, instruct your people. Encourage them to do these things." He reminds us, Imam Ali, that the benefits of serving others, there are also financial benefits to serving others. In one report, again, or in one statement, this is 252. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, إِذَا أَمْلَقْتُمْ فَتَاجِرُوا اللَّهَ بِالصَّدَقَةِ. He says, if you are impoverished, if you're facing financial difficulty, what should you do? Oftentimes, we try to figure out, how can I come out of financial distress and difficulty? Where can I invest my money? How can I make a profit? And we're very creative sometimes. Right? Young people are always thinking about how they can make more money. In today's day and age, everyone wants to be a YouTuber. Right? Because the assumption is that you're going to get rich very quick by producing some videos on YouTube. We want to make money very quickly. We're very creative to think about how we can get out of financial distress. Imam Ali says, if you are impoverished, one way, one very good investment is to engage in trade with God. He says, engage in trade with God through your sadaqah, through your act of charity. Now, how is this engaging in trade with God? Because when you assist others, the money that you give and the assistance that you give is going to God. It's not going to the others. God, on behalf of that person, is engaging in this transaction with you. If it's done sincerely for the sake of God, then you're not doing it for others, you're doing it for God. The transaction is between you and God is the best of merchants to deal with. Best merchant. The Quran says, مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ. Who is willing to give God a loan? Look at how beautiful the Quran talks about this. The Lord of Majesty, the Lord of the universe, asks us, you and me, who am I? God says, are you willing to give me a loan? God, He is the one who provides, and He is the one who sustains, and He is the one who gives. And He tells me, are you willing to give me a loan from what you have? So that here, this is one way in which interest is permissible. When God gives you interest. God says, I will multiply. The return will come to you, the capital will come to you, and it will come multiplied. Engage in trade with God. Imam Ali says, even if you are impoverished, if you find yourself in financial difficulty, give sadaqah. This is counterintuitive, right? Because you want to save your money. If I'm in financial distress, I don't want to give out my money because I consider myself in need of this money. I'm in need of every dollar, every dime. But Imam says, if you engage in this trade with God, then God will instill barakah in what you acquire. He will give barakah. And barakah is an important thing. Sometimes you make a lot of money and you find that the money is spent left and right and you don't know where it's gone. Sometimes you find that there is barakah in your wealth, that you spend it and there are great blessings that come out of it. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in our sustenance, in our wealth, then it becomes blessed. So Imam Ali says there's even financial gain for those who might be looking for financial gain. The benefits are tremendous to helping others. Imam Ali teaches us to think about various areas of service. How can we use our resources, various ways to serve others? He says in sermon number 142, he says, فَمَنْ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ مَالًا فَلْيَصِلْ بِهِ الْقَرَابَةِ وَلْيُحْسِنْ مِنْهُ الضِّيَافَةِ وَلْيَفُكَّ بِهِ الْأَسِيرَ وَالْعَانِي وَلْيُعْطِ مِنْهُ الْفَقِيرَ وَالْغَارِمِ وَلْيَصْبِرْ نَفْسَهُ عَلَى الْحُقُوقِ وَالنَّوَائِبِ وَابْتِغَاءِ الثَّوَابِ فإن فوزا بهذه الخصال شرف مكارم الدنيا ودرك فضائل الآخرة إن شاء الله. This is what Imam Ali says. He says that if God has blessed you with wealth, how should you spend this wealth? What are some ways to help others and assist others with this wealth? He says, so whomever God has given wealth, let him or her enjoin their relatives. This is one area. If you have relatives who are in need, turn to them. And the Quran says, Al-aqrabuna awla bil-ma'ruf. Those who are closest to you are more worthy of care and compassion. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we may have family members who are in need. And this is relevant to our contemporary time. Look at what many young people are facing in today's time. Those who are trying to look for a job, those who are trying to keep a job, those who are trying to own a home. It's become increasingly difficult. You all know inflation and home prices have soared. It's very challenging. Many people are facing difficulties. It's become much more difficult now, for instance, to own a home. And so you may have relatives in your family who need financial assistance. Why should they go out and take out a loan with a huge interest rate? If I'm able to help, if I'm able to assist my relatives, to assist those around me who may be in need. This is one way. Imam Ali says, help your relatives, help your family members, don't ignore them. Don't say that's not my problem. He's my cousin. He can deal with whatever. It's my nephew. It's my uncle. It's whatever. It's my child is an adult. They can take care of themselves. My parents, that's their problem. Sorry. Right? Turn to your relatives and join your relatives. So he says this is number one. He said the second is to be hospitable to your guests. If you invite someone, be hospitable towards them. Generosity, being hospitable, is a beautiful characteristic. Be hospitable to your guest. show them extra care and attention. If God has given you wealth, bring people into your home. Invite them. Gift them. Be hospitable. The sense of generosity. I know this is very uncomfortable for a lot of people when we talk about money, and especially giving money. Some people will say, Sayyid, I'm ready to give my spouse away, just not my money away. Don't talk about giving money away. But this is how we build community, dear friends. We build community. We increase our bonds of friendship and love and compassion. So be hospitable to your guest, he says. He says, pay off the debt of the debtor. If someone has debts, assist them. Let them pay off their debts. Right? And the poor. And he says, in one way, he says, help those who are captives. Release the captives. We find that this is an important thing too. Many people who are unjustly imprisoned. Our justice systems are not, entirely great. They commit lots of injustices. I don't know about the case in Canada, but certainly in the United States. The United States justice system is one that in many ways exacerbates the problem. Many people are imprisoned and taken captive and whatnot. And this not only provides them or puts them in difficult situations, social situations, but also in difficult financial situations, in debt. So Imam Ali says, sometimes if you are given wealth, be creative. Bail out those who may need it. Those who may have unjustly been detained. Here he's giving us various examples of how to help others around us, how to spend our wealth. And in general, he says spend it in a way that will assist others and bring you reward. And then he says, verily, achievement of these virtues is the most honorable of worldly values and attainment of the virtues of the hereafter, inshallah. This is what he says. So he reminds us to think creatively about how we can spend our wealth to assist society, to uplift various sectors of society. And finally, he reminds us, Imam Ali alayhi salam reminds us that the purest form of service and kindness is that which comes out of a sense of being proactive. Meaning what? He says in saying number 53, السخاء ما كان ابتداءً. Pure generosity and kindness and service is that which one initiates, which one is proactive about, where one does not wait until he or she is asked. One does not wait until they are requested, but they are proactive, they are mindful, they look for opportunities, they are actively looking for opportunities to help others. It makes a big difference. He says, when one requests, then this is not the purest form of service and kindness. It's service and kindness, but it's not the purest form. It might be that one might be put on the spot or embarrassed. Have you ever experienced this situation? Where you give because you've been put on the spot? Happens a lot at our functions. Fundraisers, they go out, and especially if they know the crowd and they know them by name, they start to point out to people, right? They put them on the spot. Now, what do you do in this case? You give. Of course you give. But was this the purest form of generosity? After you were put on the spot or after it was requested? It's very different when you go out and you initiate and you look for ways in order to assist. This, Imam Ali says, is the purest. and the truest form of service. And finally, he reminds us, he says that another element of service to others is what is known as al-ithar. Al-ithar is altruism. He says, al-itharu a'la al-makarim. Altruism is the most honorable and most noble of values. What does it mean to be altruistic? It means that we put others before ourselves. It means that we put the needs of others before the needs of ourselves. This is very difficult. It's much easier for me to help others when I'm okay, when I'm not going through difficulty, when I don't have my own issues, my own problems, right? When I have the time and the resources and the money and the skills. But if I'm facing difficulty myself, I'm having a bad day, and someone wants advice, it's much more difficult to give them my time and my energy. If I'm going through financial difficulty, it's much more difficult for me to assist others. But Imam Ali says this is the most noble of traits and virtues, that one puts the needs of others before one's own needs. And these, dear friends, and there are many, many other examples. We don't have time. Many other examples where Imam Ali pushes us and encourages us to think about the importance of service, the importance of community building. But these were not just statements that Imam Ali made, baseless and empty statements. Imam Ali embodied these teachings. Imam Ali was the embodiment of service and kindness to others. And there are many examples from his life. Prominent example where one day he takes qambar to the market. And he goes and he buys 2 shirts. One is more expensive and one is less. And he turns to qambar and he gives him the more expensive shirt. Qambar turns to him, he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, why are you giving me the more expensive shirt? You are the Khalifa. You are more suitable. It is more befitting for you to wear the more beautiful and more expensive dress. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he turns to Qambar, he says, no Qambar, I am not in need of this dress. You're a young man. I want you to look presentable. I don't need this. This is not going to do anything for me. Imam Ali embodies kindness. He embodies altruism. How many stories do we have from the life of Imam Ali and the Ahlul Bayt where they put the needs of others? Do we not read in Surah Ad-Dahr, 3 days fasting, and every single night at the time of iftar? Imagine this, brothers and sisters, imagine. Imagine tonight at the time of iftar, you go and you fill your plate with delicious food and you're ready. How many hours have you been fasting? 14, 15, 16 hours. You're ready to dig in. And someone comes and tells you they're hungry. Now, in most cases, you might share your meal. You might say, hey, come sit next to me. Bring a plate. Let's split this meal. But how many of us are truly willing to give the entire plate away? This is what the Quran teaches us about the Ahlul Bayt. And this is what makes them profound. Because it was not about rhetoric. It was not just about statements. They embodied these practices. This is why the teachings of Imam Ali are so great, because he embodies. He doesn't just speak, he acts. He teaches us through his actions. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he spent his entire life caring for others. He spent his life dedicated to uplifting the downtrodden and the grief-stricken. He helped the widows and the orphans. One day, Imam Ali is walking in the market, in another famous story. He is walking in the market, and he finds a lady who is carrying a heavy load. And he approaches her. And he offers his assistance. He says, let me carry this load for you. So she turns to him. She doesn't recognize who he is. She gives him the load. He carries the load, and as he's walking, he asks her, he says, how is it that you are out in the market carrying this load all by yourself? Don't you have anyone to help you? It was customary during that time that likely, maybe if you had a man in the house, the man would go out and shop and bring back, or you had someone who assisted you, right? In that kind of culture, in that kind of environment. So Imam Ali asks, he says, don't you have anyone to assist you? She tells him that I am a widow, that my husband died, and I have young children, and I don't have anyone to help me. So the Imam, when he hears this, of course, this causes him great distress and pain. So he turns to her and he says, how did your husband die? And she says to him, my husband died fighting alongside Ali ibn Abi Talib in battle. He gave his life away. That night, the tradition says Imam Ali could not sleep all night. The next morning, he leaves his home. He goes to the market, he buys supplies, he buys provisions, and he goes and he knocks on the door of the home of this woman. She opens the door. She sees him. He says, I've brought some things for you. She thanks him. He says, can I be of any service to you? Can I help you in any way? She tells him, actually, yes, you can. I have to do some work, prepare some food, and I have my children who need someone to watch over them. Can you come and assist? So Amir al-Mu'mineen enters. He says, let me prepare the food. She says, no. Let me prepare the food. You watch the children. So Imam Ali enters the home. And he seats these two orphans on his lap. And there's some food. And he takes the food with his blessed hand. And he feeds these children one by one. And with every bite that he gives them, he whispers to them, he says, my dear children, forgive Ali ibn Abi Talib for taking your father away from you. A friend of the woman, she comes, she enters the home. She looks around and she notices that Amir al-Mu'mineen is sitting. She recognizes him. So she turns to her friend and she asks her for an explanation. She says, what's going on? Why is Amir al-Mu'mineen sitting in your home? She turns to her, she said, Amir al-Mu'mineen? This is a man who came and offered help and I allowed him to offer help. She tells her, you did not recognize him? This is Ali ibn Abi Talib. The woman is so embarrassed. She's so ashamed. She comes running to him. She says, my master, please forgive me. I didn't recognize you. I didn't know who you were. Imam Ali turns to her. He says, no, I have to seek your forgiveness. I have to seek your forgiveness for the situation that you are in. This was Amir al-Mu'mineen. He dedicated his life to the distressed. He dedicated his life to the widows and to the orphans. And this is why, on a night like this, the 21st of the month of Ramadan, when Amir al-Mu'mineen departed this world, his loss was a great loss for everyone. Some traditions, they tell us that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when his health had deteriorated, poison had spread throughout his body, become weak. The doctors and physicians had come to him and they had recommended that he eat and drink certain things, among them that he drink milk to help. He was likely dehydrated, not well, and so word goes around town. Everyone is concerned. Every night, Amir al-Mu'mineen would go out in the middle of the night and he would go and distribute food and other things to those who were in need. For 2 nights, has not been happening. So the orphans have noticed this. The orphans have noticed that their father is no longer coming to them. So they realize, they are concerned. The tradition says that there is a knock on the door of the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The door is opened. They find several orphans with bowls of milk. We heard that this milk would be beneficial for our father, so we're here to help in any way that we can. This was Amir al-Mu'mineen. And thus, his loss was a huge tragedy. The tradition that says that Gabriel shouted, "Tahaddamat wallah arkanul huda." The pillars of guidance have come crumbling down. Because this guidance, this leadership, this service, this virtue was embodied in the life and legacy of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So as those who love and adore him, we love Amir al-Mu'mineen. We hear the name of Amir al-Mu'mineen. We hear the name of Ali, and it makes our hearts flutter. We have to ask ourselves. And on this night, we have to make a commitment to ourselves and to God that we work towards serving others. If I'm able to, I should assist the orphans. This is his final will. You want to know what his final will was? The last statements that he said before he departed, he turns to his family, and among the statements, he says, Allah, Allah fil aytam. Don't forget the orphans. Don't forget the grief-stricken. Don't forget the needy. Take care of them in my absence. This is something that each and every one of us can do, brothers and sisters. Let's adopt the will of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Let's learn not just from his words, but from his actions and his statements and his teachings. Let us learn from him. Let's work towards uplifting others. If I can help orphans, let me make a commitment to help orphans. There are many around the world. If I'm able to commit and volunteer my time and services and resources to bringing relief and comfort to those around me, let me do that. And in doing so, I will be fulfilling a huge spiritual and religious function as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to accept our deeds, our supplications, our prayers, our acts of charity during these blessed days and nights of the holy month of Ramadan. We ask Allah to open our hearts and minds to His most beautiful teachings. We ask Allah to allow us to continue to give us consistently opportunities to do good in the world, to help those around us, to uplift our communities. We ask Allah to honor us with the ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen in this life and His shafa'ah and intercession in the hereafter. We pray to Allah to bring relief and comfort to those who are sick, those who are ill, those who are facing oppression, injustice, poverty, famine, difficulty around the world. We ask Allah to bring them relief for the sake of this blessed night of the 21st of the month of Ramadan. We ask Allah to bless the souls of all of the marhumeen. For all of their souls, let us recite Surah Al-Fatiha ma'a salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.